Greetings, friends of the channel. Welcome to a new episode of our series, You Wouldn't Last 24 Hours. Today we'll immerse ourselves in one of the most brutal, spectacular, and misunderstood professions in history, being a gladiator in ancient Rome. You're about to learn the harsh reality behind Hollywood's glorified images. No, it wasn't like Ridley Scott's Gladiator. The reality was much harsher, bloodier, and, surprisingly, more professional than you imagine. Before we begin this journey into the past, I invite you to leave a like if you enjoy this historical content, hit the notification bell so you don't miss any episodes, and share your thoughts in the comments. Do you think you would survive as a gladiator? What aspect seems most challenging to you? Let's discuss it together. Get ready to discover why you, with your modern lifestyle and 21st century comforts, probably wouldn't last even 24 hours in the arena of the Roman Colosseum. To truly understand the world of gladiators, we must correctly place ourselves in time and space. We're not talking about a few years or a brief historical period. The tradition of gladiatorial combat existed for almost 700 years in Roman civilization, from the 3rd century BC until the 4th century AD, when they were finally banned by the Christian emperor Honorius. Originally, these combats weren't public entertainment spectacles, as we would later know them. They began as funeral ceremonies to honor deceased nobles. The spilled blood was considered an offering to the underworld gods, and the fights represented the courage of the deceased. These early confrontations usually involved prisoners of war or slaves fighting to the death. Over time, these funeral rituals transformed into elaborate public spectacles that served multiple purposes in Roman society. During the Republic, ambitious politicians sponsored games called munera to gain popularity among the masses. In the imperial era, emperors used these spectacles following the famous policy of bread and circuses, panem et circenses, to keep the people distracted and content. Rome was a deeply stratified society. At the top were the patricians and senators, followed by the equites, knights, then the free plebeians, and finally the slaves, who constituted approximately 1/3 of the population. While the elite enjoyed luxurious banquets, soaked with the best Falernian wine and dressed in fine wool togas, the plebeians subsisted on bread, porridge, and occasionally some salted pork. In this context of inequality, gladiatorial games functioned as a social release valve. They provided free entertainment and allowed common citizens to feel they had some power. They could influence the fate of gladiators with their shouts and gestures. The famous life or death decision, polis verso, gave the crowd a sense of control they didn't have in other aspects of their lives. The political climate during the height of the gladiators was complex. The Republic had given way to the Empire, and emperors constantly needed to legitimize themselves. Social tensions were palpable due to frequent wars, inflation, occasional famines, and power struggles. In this environment, amphitheaters became microcosms of Roman society, reflecting all its contradictions: cruelty and civilization, order and chaos, life and death. Gladiators occupied a paradoxical place in this society. Legally, many were considered infamous, of low social status, especially the condemned or slaves. However, successful gladiators could achieve levels of fame comparable to today's sports stars, receive expensive gifts, the favor of nobles, and even the affection of patrician women, despite strict laws prohibiting such relationships between classes. This is the scenario in which you'll try to survive the next 24 hours. A world where human life has relative value, where violence is entertainment, and where your survival will depend as much on your skill with weapons as on your ability to entertain a crowd thirsty for strong emotions. You wake up startled in a damp, dark stone cell. The smell of mold, rancid sweat, and excrement immediately invades your nostrils. Your eyes take time to adapt to the dimness, only interrupted by thin rays of light filtering through the cracks of a small barred window near the ceiling. The surface where you slept is nothing more than a pile of straw scattered over a stone bench. Your back hurts as if you'd been beaten, and when you touch your forehead, you discover a crust of dried blood. You don't remember how you got here, but the heavy iron shackle on your right ankle makes it clear you're not just visiting. The morning cold seeps into your bones through the rough, worn linen tunic you now wear. Your feet are bare, and your belongings have disappeared. Instead of your phone or watch, you now wear a wooden tablet tied around your neck with a rope. Something is written on it in Latin that you can't decipher. Around you, the cell, approximately 3 by 2 meters, has stone walls covered with rudimentary graffiti. Names, day counts, obscene drawings, and brief prayers to gods you don't recognize. In one corner is a wooden bucket that evidently serves as a latrine, a partial source of the stench that fills the environment. Suddenly, the metallic crash of a door opening breaks the silence. Harsh male voices exchange words in vulgar Latin as they approach down the corridor. The light of a torch casts dancing shadows through the bars of your cell. Get up, novice. The order comes from a stocky man with scars crisscrossing his face like a map of past battles. He carries a whip coiled at his belt and a rod in his hand. The Lannister wants to see the newcomers. Move it. The guard inserts a rusty key into your cell's lock. The door opens with a squeak that pierces your ears. As you step into the torch-lit corridor, you discover you're not alone. Other men of various ethnicities and builds, some with evident recent wounds, are being herded like cattle from other cells. The corridor is carved into the rock, with arched brick ceilings. The uneven floor is worn by the passage of countless feet over decades, perhaps centuries. As you advance, occasionally pushed by the guard's rod, when your pace slows, you perceive the aroma of freshly baked bread mixing with the smell of sweat and metal. Finally, you emerge into an interior courtyard, surrounded by high walls. The intense blue Italian sky greets you along with the relentless Mediterranean sun that momentarily blinds you. When your eyes adjust, you observe a rectangular space with compacted dirt floor. On one side are wooden structures simulating enemies, training posts with marks from countless blows, and racks with practice weapons made of wood or dulled metal. In the center of the courtyard, a middle-aged man in a higher quality tunic awaits you. Beside him, an assistant holds a scroll and a stylus for writing. Several muscular men with shaved heads and tribal tattoos stand behind him, observing you all with expressions ranging from amusement to contempt. Welcome to the Ludus of Marcus. Quintilius Proculus, announces the man in the center with a voice projected to command respect. I am Caius, the Lannister. From now on, your previous lives are over. You are now property of the Ludus. Some of you are here because of debts, others for crimes, and some due to misfortune in war. I don't care. The only thing that matters to me is whether you can become gladiators who bring glory and denarii to this house. You look around and see approximately 20 men lined up with you. Their faces reflect a mixture of fear, resignation, and in some cases, fierce determination. You realize you're in a ludus, a gladiator school, and that the next few hours will determine your fate in this brutal Roman world into which you've been thrown without any preparation. Your first morning as an aspiring gladiator begins long before dawn. While in your modern life, you were accustomed to waking up to the gentle alarm of your phone, perhaps at 7 or 8 in the morning, here you're roughly awakened around the 4th Roman hour, approximately 4 a.m. by our modern clock. With the strident sound of a metal horn, there's no time to stretch or check notifications. A guard strikes the bars with a wooden stick, and you must immediately get up. The first activity of the day is particularly shocking for someone from the 21st century: communal cleaning. You're led along with other novices to collective latrines, where there's no privacy whatsoever. Several people relieve themselves sitting on a row of holes over a flowing water channel. There's no toilet paper, only shared sponges tied to sticks that are washed in running water after each use. Some veterans even casually converse during this process, something unthinkable in our era of individual cubicles and closed doors. Breakfast is extremely frugal and unappetizing to your modern palate, a kind of barley porridge, pulse, with a bitter taste, accompanied by a piece of hard bread and water. No coffee, juices, milk, or sugary cereals. The portion is small, barely enough to give you energy. You'll soon discover that Gladiator's diet was primarily vegetarian, rich in carbohydrates and low in animal proteins, designed to build a protective layer of fat over the muscles. Gladiators were known as hordeari, or barley eaters, for this reason. After breakfast, the real challenge begins: training. But first, you must go through a humiliating ritual. As a novice, your head is shaved, and you're assigned the worst training equipment. Veterans have priority in everything, from the best practice weapons to the most experienced instructors. The training is brutal and begins with a warm-up that would already be a complete workout for you. Running several laps around the courtyard, carrying sandbags or heavy logs. Your modern muscles, perhaps accustomed to recreational gym workouts or sedentary lifestyle, scream in pain after half an hour. And this is just the beginning. The second phase consists of exercises with the palace, a wooden post driven into the ground that simulates an opponent. Using a wooden sword twice as heavy as a real one, you must repeatedly strike the post following specific patterns. The ludus doctor, meanwhile, observes the novices to identify those with suitable builds for different types of gladiators. The most agile might become a Thraex, Thracian gladiator, or Retiarius, net and trident gladiator, while the more stocky would be trained as Mamillo or Secutor. After hours of physical training under the Mediterranean sun, when your muscles are trembling and you can barely lift your arms, technical training with the doctores, instructors, begins. These men, usually retired ex-gladiators, show no mercy. Their teaching method is simple: demonstration followed by repetition until perfection, with rod blows for each mistake made. There are no detailed explanations, no constructive feedback, only brusque orders and physical punishment. At midday, a somewhat more substantial meal awaits you. More bread, perhaps some legumes, occasionally small portions of lower quality meat or salted fish, and possibly some seasonal fruit. The meal is taken quickly and without much conversation, as novices are exhausted and veterans maintain their own social circle. The afternoon brings new challenges, training in pairs or small groups, where you must apply what you've learned. Here is where you receive your first real injuries. Although the weapons are for practice, The blows are real and painful. Bruises, cuts, and sprains are common. There's no time to complain. Pain is part of the training. Hygiene is another constant problem. Sweat accumulates throughout the day, mixing with dust and occasional blood. At the end of the day, you're allowed to wash in communal baths where the water is rarely changed. There's no soap as you know it, but oil that is applied to the skin and then scraped off with a strigil, curved metal scraper. The water is barely lukewarm at best. Night brings little rest. After a dinner similar to lunch, you're returned to your cell before nightfall. There's no adequate lighting, no entertainment, no communication with the outside world. Some veteran gladiators share stories or play dice, but as a novice, you're excluded from these social circles. Your bed is the same stone bench with straw that you met this morning. The sounds of men snoring, crying silently, or praying to their gods fill the night air. The muscle pain is intense. Every joint in your body protests, and you know that tomorrow it all begins again. If you survive this first night without succumbing to an infection from your open wounds, or without your mind breaking under the brutal reality of your new life. As a novice in the Ludus, you soon discover that the world of gladiators is much more structured and professionalized than you imagined. It's not simply about brutes thrown into an arena to kill each other. There's an entire industry around this bloody spectacle with its own hierarchies, specialties, and economy. The gladiators' work didn't consist only of fighting. During the long periods between combats, which could be months, gladiators trained constantly, but also performed maintenance tasks in the Ludus, helped train novices, or served as bodyguards for the Lanista. Some with special skills worked as assistant armorers or masseurs for their comrades. The professional structure was surprisingly sophisticated. There were numerous categories of gladiators, each with its own equipment, fighting style, and traditional opponents. The Mumillo wore a helmet shaped like a fish, a large rectangular shield, scutum, and a short sword, gladius, wore protection. On the right leg, ochreia, and typically fought against the Thraex. The Thraex, or Thracian, used a small square shield, parma, a curved sword, sica, protections on both legs, and a distinctive crested helmet. He was agile and technical. The Retiarius was perhaps the most recognizable. He fought with a net, a trident, and a dagger with almost no armor, just protection on the left shoulder, Galerus. He represented a fisherman and generally faced the secutor. The secutor, or pursuer, had equipment similar to the Mumillo, but with a smooth, rounded helmet designed to prevent the Retiarius's net from snagging. Each type had its own set of techniques, strengths, and weaknesses. For you, as a novice with no prior combat experience, mastering any of these styles would require years of painful training. The economy around gladiators was surprisingly complex. A rookie gladiator like you had virtually no economic value. You were a risky investment for the Lanista, who had paid for your training, feeding, and basic medical care. However, if you survived and started winning fights, your value would increase exponentially. Successful professional gladiators could earn considerable sums. A prize for victory, premia, could vary from a few hundred to thousands of sesterces for the stars. To put this in perspective, a Roman legionary earned approximately 900 sesterces per year, while a schoolteacher earned about 2,000. A top-tier gladiator could earn more than 15,000 sesterces in a single day of games, although most of it went to the Lanista. Inflation during the Roman imperial period was significant. At the beginning of the empire, a silver denarius, equivalent to 4 sesterces, could buy food for one person for a week. By the time of Diocletian, 3rd century AD, its value had fallen dramatically due to currency devaluation. Regarding medicine and health, you'd discover that medical care for gladiators was surprisingly advanced for the time, although brutal by modern standards. Important ludi had specialized physicians, medicus, who had developed sophisticated techniques for treating combat wounds. They could suture deep wounds, immobilize fractures, and perform basic surgeries such as amputations when necessary. However, there were no antibiotics. Anesthesia consisted mainly of strong wine or plant extracts like mandrake, and surgical hygiene was rudimentary. Infections were common and deadly. Diseases such as malaria, dysentery, and tuberculosis lurked in the poorly ventilated barracks where gladiators slept. The technologies available to gladiators were limited but effective. Roman metallurgy allowed the creation of reasonably high quality iron and steel weapons. Tempering and forging techniques created blades that could maintain a decent edge. Armor was made of bronze, hardened leather, and occasionally iron plates. A particularly important innovation for gladiators was the standardized training system developed over centuries. Codified movement sequences, specific exercises to develop, reflexes and combat techniques adapted to each type of gladiator constituted a corpus of knowledge transmitted from generation to generation of doctors, trainers. Another crucial technology was medical. Gladiators were valuable, and therefore specific surgical techniques were developed for their common injuries. Surprisingly sophisticated Roman surgical instruments have been found. Scalpels, forceps, needles, and even specialized instruments for extracting weapon tips. For you, accustomed to antibiotics, effective painkillers, modern surgery, and physical rehabilitation, Roman medicine would seem primitive and frightening. A cut that in the 21st century would be treated with stitches and antibiotics could easily become a deadly wound in the Roman world due to infections. A fracture that today would be repaired with surgery could leave you crippled for life or led to death. And most discouraging, a gladiator's calendar. If you survived initial training and were considered fit for combat, you could expect to participate in 2 to 3 annual fights. The average life expectancy of a gladiator once he began fighting in the arena was approximately 10 fights, or about 3 to 4 years. Some exceptional ones survived longer, but they were rare. Your first day as a novice gladiator coincides with a significant event, the celebration of games in honor of the emperor's birthday. These are not ordinary combats, but lavish spectacles that will last several days and include not only gladiators, but also chariot races, hunts of exotic animals, venations, and elaborate public executions, noxii. For the ludus, this is a crucial event. The lanista has invested a fortune in training gladiators and now has the opportunity to showcase his best products before the Roman elite. Veteran gladiators have been training with greater intensity for weeks. Their diets have been modified to reach peak performance, and the atmosphere in the barracks is charged with tension. As a novice, you won't participate in the main combats, but you'll be part of the spectacle in other ways. Apprentices are used in inaugural parades, pompa, carrying standards, assisting the main gladiators, or even participating in preliminary exhibitions where training techniques are demonstrated. This is your first exposure to the amphitheatre and Roman crowds. The day begins before dawn. The ludus buzzes with activity, armourers polishing equipment, physicians preparing their instruments and potions, servants running with messages. The gladiators who will fight today participate in a solemn ritual, the Cena Libera or Last Supper. Unlike your usual frugal diet, this meal is abundant and of better quality. They're allowed to eat meat, good bread, and drink undiluted wine. For some, it will literally be their last meal. After the banquet, you witness another ritual, the fighters writing their wills. Although many gladiators are slaves with few possessions, some veterans have accumulated small fortunes and personal items they wish to bequeath. The atmosphere is surprisingly dignified, almost religious. Some pray to Nemesis, the patron goddess of gladiators, others to their native deities. At midday, the entire ludus moves to the amphitheater. It's not the Colosseum, which might not even exist depending on the imperial period you're in. But it's impressive, an oval structure with capacity for thousands of spectators. The crowd already roars from the stands while street vendors offer food, drinks, and written programs on tablets with the names and records of the gladiators who will fight, while helping prepare experienced gladiators in the underground chambers. Hypogam. You observe their final ritual before combat. Some remain silent, others joke nervously. A veteran of multiple combats tells you, "Remember this, novice. It's not just about killing or dying, it's how you do it." The crowd forgives, the brave even if they lose. Never show fear, the moment arrives. The games begin with the elaborate inaugural procession, Pompa, where all participants parade through the arena. You march with other novices, holding a heavy standard. The crowd barely pays attention to you, reserving their cheers for the stars, who come behind. From the honor stand, the editor, sponsor of the games, and dignitaries observe with impassive expressions. The first events are the venaciones, specialized hunters, venatores, facing wild beasts. You watch in horror as a man is torn apart by a bear, while the crowd applauds enthusiastically. Next come the executions of condemned criminals, some staged as mythological recreations. A man is burned alive representing Hercules on the funeral pyre. Another is devoured by wild dogs portraying the death of Actaeon. Finally come the gladiator combats. You observe from the entrance tunnel as pairs of fighters enter the arena, salute the editor with the famous Ave Caesar, Moriturite, salutant, Hail Caesar, those who are about to die salute you, and begin their duels. The violence is real, but so is the skill. It's not the bloody chaos you imagined. It's more like a brutal sport with strict rules. There are referees, summa rudis, who intervene when necessary. Not all fights end in death. Many defeated gladiators receive the missio, pardon, if they've fought valiantly. However, you also witness the harsh reality of this spectacle. Athraeus receives a blow that opens his abdomen. He falls to his knees and raises his index finger, ad digitum, in sign of surrender. The crowd is divided. Some turn, their thumbs down, pollis verso, others up. The editor decides his fate with a simple gesture. The victorious gladiator, following the signal, places his sword at the nape of the fallen man and pushes with professional precision, ending his life in seconds. The bodies of the fallen are dragged through the Porta Libitinaria, named after Libitina, goddess of funerals, using hooks, leaving bloody trails in the sand that is quickly raked and covered with fresh sand. The spectacle continues without pause. At nightfall, you return to the ludus. The contrast is shocking. Gladiators who hours before were acclaimed by thousands now return to being prisoners in dark cells. The victorious receive small privileges, better food, perhaps a woman, certainly the respect of their companions. The wounded are attended by physicians amid screams and the smell of cauterized iron. One of the veterans doesn't return. His armor and possessions are silently collected by the servants. There's no funeral, no great lamentations. Such is the life of the gladiator, an older Thraex tells you as he observes the scene. Today him, tomorrow perhaps me, or you, novice, if you get that far. This experience deeply marks you. You've seen in a single day what most common Romans would experience perhaps a dozen times in their entire lives. The lightness with which death is treated, the strange mixture of cruelty and admiration that gladiators receive, and above all the realization that this could be your fate in the coming months if you survive the training. During your first 24 hours in the Ludus, you interact with several characters who represent the different roles and archetypes within the world of gladiators. Each offers you a unique perspective on the life that awaits you. The first and most influential is Caius Septimius, the Lanista or owner of the Ludus. He's a man of equestrian origin, Roman middle upper class, who has found in the gladiator business a way to enrich himself and ascend socially. Despite his wealth, Roman social prejudices keep him in an ambiguous position. His profession is associated with infamia, social dishonor, because he profits from spectacle and blood, activities considered unworthy of a respectable citizen. Caius is a practical and calculating man. During the initial inspection, he examines you as if you were livestock in a market, checks your teeth, feels your muscles, observes your bone structure. This one might be worth something if he survives basic training, he comments to his assistant. He has good structure for a secutor, though he'll need to put on weight. For the lanista, you're not a person, but an investment. He is paid for you, either buying you as a slave or acquiring your contract if you're an octorati, a free man who sells himself voluntarily as a gladiator and expects a return. If you die during training, he will have lost his money. If you triumph in the arena, you'll generate considerable profits for him. Despite his commercial coldness, Caius has a reputation for being a fair lanista compared to others. A well-treated gladiator fights better, he often says. Fear can make a man fight, but only pride and ambition will make him fight well. The second important character is Titus Gallus, the doctor or head trainer of the Ludus, a retired ex-gladiator. After winning the Rudes, a wooden sword symbolizing freedom after years of distinguished service, Titus has been training fighters for 15 years. His body is covered with scars, he's missing half an ear, and walks with a slight limp, permanent reminders of his career. Unlike the lanista, Titus sees you with experienced eyes that evaluate your potential as a fighter, not just as an economic investment. During your first training, he observes you carefully as you clumsily try to imitate the basic movements with the practiced sword. Your posture is terrible, he tells you abruptly, hitting your legs with a rod to force you to separate them correctly. But you have good reflexes and don't complain like a matron when you take a hit. Living may not be completely useless. Coming from Titus, this could almost be considered a compliment. The more veteran novices explain to you afterward that the doctor rarely wastes words on recruits he considers won't survive basic training. The relationship between Titus and the gladiators is complex. He is severe to the point of cruelty, but also genuinely concerned with forming fighters who can survive in the arena. "I'm not here to make you happy," he frequently tells the novices. "I'm here to keep you alive a little longer." The third significant character is Numerius, a medicus, physician, specialized in treating gladiators' wounds. Unlike the modern stereotype, Roman medicine was relatively advanced, especially in trauma treatment, and ludus physicians were particularly expert in combat wounds. Numerius is a Greek freedman, a former slave freed for his services. Like many Roman physicians, he learned his trade in the army before specializing in treating gladiators. You meet him when, during your first training, you receive a cut on your forearm. While cleaning the wound with wine and stitching it with precision using a bone needle and catgut thread, he speaks to you with professional calm. Novices always get injured in the first days. Too much enthusiasm, little technique. If you survive the initial month, perhaps you have a future. He explains that the physician's life is intrinsically linked to that of gladiators. "I treat them as broken pieces that I must repair. I can't afford sentimentality. Today I'm stitching your arm. Tomorrow I might be amputating it if it gets infected, or certifying your death if you take a bad hit in your first combat." During your first day, you also meet Demetrius, a veteran gladiator who has survived more than 15 combats. An extraordinary achievement. Of Syrian origin, he was captured during the Eastern campaigns and sold as a slave before being bought by the ludus. His specialty is as a Dimachorus, an uncommon type of gladiator who fights with two swords. Demetrius has become a local celebrity. He has devoted followers among fans, and on the city walls, graffiti with his name and feats can be seen. Demetrius 15 Victorias, or Demetrius Invictus. They call him the Syrian, and his image appears on oil lamps and small statuettes sold as souvenirs on game days. Unlike what you'd expect, Demetrius isn't particularly arrogant. "Fame is as deadly as a poorly gripped sword," he tells you during dinner. "I've seen many good fighters die because they started to believe in their own legend. In the arena, we all bleed the same." He tells you that, after so many victories, he's close to earning his freedom. 2 or 3 more successful combats and he could receive the rudies. But he also confesses that he's afraid. What does a gladiator do when he stops being one? "I've been a fighter since I was 17. I don't know how to do anything else." Many freed veterans end up as bodyguards for patricians or trainers in minor ludi. Some even voluntarily return to the arena because they can't live without the roar of the crowd. Contrasting with the ludus star is Flavius, a novice who arrived a week before you. A former baker who fell into debt after a fire destroyed his business. He sold himself as an auctorati to support his family. He's older than most recruits, nearly 30, and visibly less physically fit. "I won't survive this," he confesses in a whisper during the night when the guards can't hear him. "But my children will eat thanks to the money they paid for me. That's all that matters." The harsh reality that Flavius represents hits you hard. For every Demetrius who achieves glory, dozens of men like Flavius die in anonymity, either during the brutal training or in their first combats. His resignation to the inevitable contrasts painfully with your own fear and confusion. Women are also present in this world, although in very different roles. You meet Livia, a slave who serves as a nurse assistant to the physician, and occasionally as company for favorite gladiators. Despite her servile position, she exercises a different type of power within the ludus. She knows secrets, carries messages, and sometimes even smuggles small luxuries like wine or sweets. Men think that because we wear chains we have no power, she tells you while bandaging your injured arm. But even chains can be used as weapons if you know how. She tells you that some high-class women, mainly widows or wives of rich merchants, regularly visit the ludus, supposedly to supervise the gladiators they will sponsor in upcoming games. But we all know why they really come, she adds with a cynical smile. They seek the thrill of being close to men who live on the edge of death. Some even pay for private privileges with the champions. These characters offer you a complete mosaic of ludus society, a microcosm of the Roman world with its own hierarchies, hopes and tragedies. In just 24 hours, you've seen humanity in its most raw and contradictory forms. Cruelty and compassion, resignation and ambition, slavery and yearnings for freedom. And most disturbing of all, you begin to understand that in this world, you too will have to find your place, become one of these archetypes or perish in the attempt. Night falls over the ludus as you contemplate this realization, listening to the snores and occasional sobs of your companions in misfortune. After these 24 hours in the life of a novice gladiator, I think it's quite clear why practically none of us would survive in that world. The reasons are as numerous as they are compelling. Physically, our modern bodies aren't prepared for such brutality. Accustomed to comfort, climate control, and mostly sedentary work, we would lack the basic endurance necessary even to survive the first day of training. Romans grew up performing constant physical labor. We grew up in front of screens. Psychologically, the difference is even deeper. We've been educated in societies that condemn explicit violence, that value human life, and consider death as something to be delayed and hidden. For Romans, death was a daily companion, visible and accepted. The cruelty that seems unacceptable to us was entertainment for them. We couldn't mentally adapt to a world where killing or dying to entertain others was considered normal and even honorable. Our modern sensibility also wouldn't withstand the basic living conditions, the lack of privacy, rudimentary hygiene, absence of effective medical care, brutal social hierarchies. Things we take for granted, such as personal autonomy, individual rights, or even the possibility of questioning orders, were alien concepts in Roman society. However, this journey into the past reveals something important about ourselves and about human history. Gladiators weren't simply victims or executioners. They were real people trapped in a cultural system that today seems incomprehensible to us. They had hopes, fears, friendships, and rivalries. They developed their own professional culture, with codes of conduct, techniques refined over generations, and even a certain pride in their trade. This contrast between their world and ours invites us to reflect. What aspects of our own society will seem equally barbaric or incomprehensible to people of the future? What practices that we consider normal will be viewed with horror by our descendants? Perhaps the most valuable lesson from this exercise is understanding that history isn't just a collection of dates and battles, but a vast panorama of human experiences, some terribly alien to our modern sensibility. Understanding that cultural distance, that abyss between their world and ours, is the first step to truly appreciating the past on its own terms, without idealizing or demonizing it. Subscribe so you don't miss out, and let me know in the comments what other historical period you'd like us to analyze through the lens of You Wouldn't Last 24 Hours. Thank you for accompanying me on this journey through time and culture. Until the next episode.